Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Jeb Blount joining us. Jeb, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be doing this interview here with you today. And let's just get things started. For those who don't know, you aren't familiar with your work, Jeb, just take a moment and share what you do.
I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Sales Gravy. We are a global training, development, and sales acceleration advisory company, one of the most respected in the world these days. And along with that, I'm the author of 9 books, including my brand new book that's coming out in June called Objections, the ultimate guide to mastering the art and science of getting past no. And I travel all over the globe speaking to leaders and salespeople, and our practice focuses primarily on customer-facing activities. So whether we're doing training or whether one of our consultants is working with a company to help them optimize their sales organization, whether it's customer service, leadership, or sales, everything that we focus on is how human beings interact with other human beings to influence their behavior.
Terrific. We're going to explore that in much greater detail and certainly make sure that everyone knows about your book and what you have going on here a little bit later. But let's kind of take a little bit of a travel back in time before you had Sales Gravy and before you acted as a consultant and speaker and so forth. You work at a company called Aramark, and it looks like you really worked your way up that organization, to a position of VP of sales. And I'm interested, what actions and mindsets did you practice that really allowed you to achieve that level of progress and growth within that organization?
That's a great question. I started there right on a truck, basically driving a truck and wearing a uniform, have my name on it. And I progressed from doing that job when I was 25 years old to a vice president's role when I was 34 years old in a really big company. And my career there was like a rocket ship. And so much of it was a couple of things. One, being able to get stuff done. And primarily the stuff that I was getting done was selling stuff. So creating revenue. And I learned at a very early age that if you could create revenue, that the world was your oyster. People would get out of your way. You would get opportunities. And so the ability to very quickly do that made all the difference in the world. The second thing that I did was tap into a really incredible, gifted group of leaders who guided me and mentored me along the way. I was unbelievably fortunate to have these leaders come into my life. From before I was with Aramark, Mary Gardner was one of my first leaders. I worked for a company called Nutrisystem before that, to leaders like Steve Donnelly and Chris Dodds, who were just instrumental in helping me make a difference. One of my early leaders, a guy named Roger McKee, when I got my first big promotion, he gave me some of the best advice I'd ever been given. And it's advice that I'd used relentlessly in my job. And he said that your role as a leader is to make yourself obsolete. So everything that you do is about finding a way to find other people that can do your job better than you can do it, so that the company will always find something more important for you to do. And I took that advice to heart and built teams where essentially I got to a point where they didn't need me anymore, and the next opportunity would come along. And a lot of it was the same old thing that you hear from everybody. It was dedication, hard work, surrounding yourself with good people, and keeping a great attitude. And I got lucky a couple of times, but most of it was just good mentors that gave me great advice that I paid attention to.
Yeah, the gift of mentorship and coaching and support along the way is certainly one that's played a very big role in our growth as a company. So certainly hear that. At what stage did you kind of start then going out on your own? What was that transition like? When did it happen?
The transition was the story you hear from a lot of people who were coming of age in the last decade. We hit this bump in the road in 2007, 2008 called the Great Recession. And that bump in the road caused a lot of changes and rifts in the business world. The company that I work for, Aramark, one of the things that drove that business was employment. And when there was mass unemployment, when the recession hit, the company had to downsize and make a lot of changes. And I happened to be one of those changes. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, I'd have been there for my entire life. I would have never left the company. So I found myself in a situation where I had to make a choice. And the choice was, do I go back out into the corporate world, which I could have done easily and find another job with another company, or do I start my own business? And I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and it was something that was in my heart. But honestly, I was scared to death of leaving the comfort of a paycheck. I was making a lot of money. So it wasn't like I was a little tiny paycheck. It was a big old paycheck, and it had a lot of benefits that came with it, and stock options, those type of things. So I went on interviews. I talked to headhunters, and I was in a position to move to another company, but I just kept thinking about maybe writing a book and doing something on my own. I can't tell you that I had some grandiose plan, because I didn't really have any idea of anything. I just knew that I could sell, and I was comfortable with that. And I had a couple of ideas around Sales Gravy. So I made the fateful decision to strike out on my own, knowing that the age I was, in my late 30s at the time, that going on my own and becoming an entrepreneur, in essence, for the corporate world, would make me unemployable. So I was burning the ships at the shore and charging forward. It made all the difference in the world, but it was a very difficult decision to make. And I didn't necessarily have a real plan for what I was going to do. It wasn't until 4 months into it that I realized that I needed to come up with a plan, or I was going to starve to death. And what you see in Sales Gravy today was essentially born, although it took 7 years for us to iterate to the place where we are today.
Right. So we'll come to that plan in just a moment. I want to explore that with you. But you mentioned that you had a lot of fear, right? Fear of, I guess, the unknown and leaving the comfort of the corporate environment. How did you overcome that fear? What was that actually, I don't know if you remember, because I know it's back a few days here or a few years, but what was the real impetus for you to say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm facing the fear, but I'm going to overcome it and I'm going to move forward?
That's a great question, but I didn't really overcome the fear. I just dealt with it. I was afraid. I was afraid the entire time. I began the process of building out Sales Gravy. I made a couple of mistakes early, just figured out that I couldn't make money with what I was doing. I was fortunate in that I'd been a pretty good saver for most of my life. So I had a solid nest egg that I could depend on for income. My wife was working, and I was burning a lot of our income or our savings. So that was a tough conversation to have with my wife over the dinner table. But it wasn't until years later that I quit being afraid. But I would wake up every night in a panic and a sweat, thinking, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail. And that was really what drove me. I wasn't thinking about what the opportunity was. I wasn't thinking about how great I might be. I was thinking, I stepped out of the comfort of the corporate environment, of the place where I knew what to do and how to do it. And I started building my own thing. And I was afraid that I would have to go crawling back, or I would have to face my wife and say that I didn't make it, or tell my friends that I gave it a good try, but it didn't work, or end up in a lesser role than I had before and have to start all over again. All of the worst case scenarios would go through my head. Mm-hmm. And what it really pushed me to do was I doubled down and worked twice as hard. Back in those years, it wasn't unusual for me to be working 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd be so tired, my entire body would hurt. I still remember physically just being aching, right? Because I'd been up for so long working. And I was working so hard because I didn't know what to do. So I was having to run into walls and go, oh, that hurt. Let's not do that again. Let me do it again. I was cold calling. I was driving. I was building content. At the same time, I was building a website. I was trying to find customers.
Sounds like you were doing everything.
I was sweeping the floors. I was getting coffee. I went from working in a corporate office with 2 assistants and living the high life, and working in a Fortune 500 company in the executive level is a little bit like being a rock star in some respects. I went from that to sitting in my office down in Florida in my flip-flops, dialing people up and begging them to do business with me. I had to learn everything from the ground up. And at the same time, I'm writing my first book, and it was fun. I mean, it was exhilarating. I enjoyed the work. If I didn't enjoy the work, I wouldn't have done it, but I enjoyed all of that. I was always under the cloud of what if I fail? And that's not how everybody does things. That's just how I did things. I don't wake up in the middle of the night anymore and worry about whether I'm going to fail. My business we're going on 12 years old. The business is sustainable. It's almost to the point where if I wasn't here, the business could continue. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting to that place. So I'm maybe 2 years away from being able to say this business can live without me being in it. But so I don't have that anymore. But that's what drove me, was my fear of failure. I didn't want to lose. And in some cases, it allowed me to use brute force to figure things out and to get through some really bad days where everything was going wrong. that fear served me in that place. I noticed that the story that everybody wants to hear, like everyone wants to hear the Superman story where you faced fear down and you crossed over the threshold and you said, you can't bother me anymore. But that's not how it really worked for me. I just had to just grind it out every single day.
No, I think, Jeb, the story that you're sharing here is the real story, the one that may not end up in Inc. magazine or Fast Company, some quick success that most people kind of tend to read about or think about. What you experienced is really what a lot of people go through, but just don't talk about. How did you justify to yourself and to your wife going, reaching into your savings and taking that money to build your business? Because a lot of people who are new to consulting or they are at a stage where they want to grow their business further because they're kind of at a plateau, look at their situation, say, yeah, I know I need to do more. I know I need to invest more into myself, into my business, but they're afraid to do it because they look at their savings as their kind of retirement plan, their security, and they essentially hold off investing in themselves. So what was going through your mind? How did you actually justify that to yourself and to your wife that it was worthwhile?
Yeah, so it was a thing where I was justifying it. I remember saying to my wife a lot, trust me, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that she's our CFO now and we're phenomenally successful. As a business, if you just looked at it from a purely income standpoint, we don't worry about money. We don't worry about anything. We make enough money to cover anything. In fact, we invest most everything we make back into the business. So there were a couple of things that drove my ability to do this. One is that we live a pretty lean lifestyle. And even in my heyday as a corporate executive, where I was making a ton of money and I had every privilege you can possibly imagine, we were pretty tight with our money. Really no debt, no expenditures that you would consider to be extravagant. And we dialed in a little bit tighter and we focused on that. So that's one thing. I was working to succeed, not necessarily working to make money. And that helped. It doesn't mean that we didn't have to tighten a few things up here and there, but we already lived an austere lifestyle. And that's one of the things that I tell people all the time, and especially young people. You want to be an entrepreneur? Stop spending money. You can't live an extravagant lifestyle and at the same time build a business because your money has to go, number one, to investing in the business. The business comes first. So that was one thing. The other was I was saying, trust me. And sometimes I look at her now and I wonder if she thinks back on those days when maybe she didn't trust me, but she did. And we've been together since high school. So we've got a long relationship where that trust was already established. If we'd been together for 2 years, that may have been a little bit difficult. And that's another thing that I think we maybe discount sometimes when you're building a business. But the person that you're married to is going to have a big impact on whether or not you're going to be successful in business. And I happen to marry the right person. That's extremely important. If your partner or spouse or whoever it is in your life that you share your life with is not on board, it can be difficult. That doesn't mean, when I say on board, that doesn't mean that they're gung-ho, because certainly I think a lot of it was just a fascination that I was doing this. There were a couple of tough conversations about the money that I was spending on building a website, that type of thing. But it wasn't like we sat down and justified it. We didn't sit down and spell it out. I just did it. I moved forward and did it. And I was very, very careful with my money, very, very careful how I spent things. Part of the reason that I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning, my body aching, was instead of spending $50,000 to pay someone to build my website, I just learned how to build a website and did it myself. And I still do things like that. Right now, as we're speaking, I'm in the middle of adding some stuff to my LMS. I could easily pay somebody to do this, but it's a Saturday and I can knock these things out. I'm getting these things done. And that allows us to run lean and be smart with our money and invest it back in the business. And I also came from a business background. I came from a company that taught me that profit is important. Make money. Your job is to make money. So always my focus was on making a profit. Everything that I did, every decision I made was understanding that I was going to make mistakes, but I couldn't make mistakes that broke the business. So that was number one. And when I was making decisions, I needed to make decisions that would be focused on how I would have margin in any dollar that I brought in. It took a couple of years to start making money. I had to invest in the business up front. But once we started making money, we always made money. No debt, never took out a loan, never borrowed money, never had an investor, never did any of those things. But the trade-off was working in some cases 16, 17, 18 hours a day, every single day. And almost 12 years since we started the business. It's Saturday, I'm working. I'm going to work tomorrow as well. I usually work 7 days a week, every single week. And I work pretty long hours. And so does my wife, who is our CFO now. She left her job and came to the business once the business grew. So we still do that. And we do it because that's what it takes to run a successful business and make it go. Now, do I dream about a time when I don't have to work 7 days a week? Yeah, but it may never happen because that's the price you pay if you want to be an entrepreneur.
So this is a really interesting topic. And I think that depending on who you ask, you're going to get a different viewpoint or perspective on that. But one thing I want to explore here is your background, Jeb, is a sales guy, right? In the corporate world, you were doing sales, obviously very good at it. And then when you went out to be a consultant, to be your own boss, build your own business, you had to sell, but this time not somebody else's product or service, but you, right? Your own.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you made some mistakes in the early days and that you were working really long hours to be able to make it successful. A lot of people might say, well, yeah, Jeb, you're a sales guy, so naturally sales should come to you. And so you should just be successful from the start. But clearly you also encountered some challenges. So what kind of mistakes did you make early on? And then I'm just really interested in exploring, how did you actually go out and land your first client?
Well, when I first built Sales Gravy, crazy as it sounds in the middle of the recession, I built Sales Gravy as a job board because I realized about 4 months into building Sales Gravy, I initially built it as a portal for salespeople. And I thought, well, with information, can sell ads, that type of thing. I realized that I wasn't going to make any money doing that. I mean, we sold ads, but that wasn't the type of ads we needed. And I remember sitting outside of my son's elementary school and I'm kind of walking through the scenarios. Where's the money? Where's the money? Where's the money? Now, I knew I wanted to be a training company. I knew I wanted to go speak. And I was getting a few gigs from people that knew me, folks that had worked at Aramark or worked at other companies who were throwing a bone to me here and there. But it wasn't nearly enough to sustain the business. And what I needed was to create monthly recurring revenue that allowed me then to invest in the platform that I needed to go be a trainer, consultant, keynote speaker, workshop deliverer, that type of person. Nobody knows who you are. It's a pretty tough sell. And I'll tell you the truth is I can sell anything. The hardest thing that I sell is me. Like the hardest thing that I do is someone's on the phone with me and they say, we want to hire you. It's almost better for me to find someone else to handle that conversation than me because I love what I do so much that I have a bad tendency of giving it away for free. Don't anybody listen and just get any ideas. Don't call me up and ask for free, but I probably would give it to you because I like doing it so much. And the flip side of it is that it's difficult sometimes to sell yourself as a product. And I'm great at selling and I'm willing to admit to you honestly and openly that I really suck at selling myself. So I got other people to help me do that. Still suck at it. I didn't underprice myself. I got gigs and I built a platform. But at the same time, I built my Sales Gravy job board, which in 2010, we became the market share leader in that space. Well, if you're generating $100,000 a month in ad revenue, it gets a little easier to get over selling yourself. And if I don't get enough margin in selling a workshop or going out and doing a training, I've got a consistent form of income coming in. Now, what I realized was I sucked at selling myself. That's why I built the job board. I needed to create something that was profitable, that generated a lot of recurring revenue so that it would give me the buffer to learn how to sell myself. I'm still terrible at it. I'm way better at it than I used to. And one of the reasons why my wife came to work with me was that she realized how bad I was at it. And she was like, I've got to help you get better at selling your own services. Not a problem selling an ad. If you wanted to come to me and post jobs, that was pretty easy. I could sell that all day long, but that wasn't personal. And I know this is a weird conversation to have, especially people who are consultants, but this is a really tough thing. So I sold something that I was really good at selling, and I built the business into a couple of $1 million a year, selling nothing but online ads. I mean, there was one point in 2010, 2011 that we had so much cash coming in, and we were just trying to put it places. It was wild, and my business started growing. But at that point, when you start having that confidence, it gets easier and gets easier and gets easier and gets easier. And then you realize that I got to bring someone in with me that's better at selling me than I am. And I started bringing in salespeople, and we began iterating from there. And then we begin to shift. And the business, my biggest accomplishment over, let's say, the last 36 months has been shifting the business away from online advertising for jobs into a pure play consulting and training and development company. And we've done a really, really nice job of doing that. It was a very difficult thing to disconnect from a consistent stream of revenue. The job board still exists. We still have a sales team that works it, but we don't worry about that anymore. It's not something that's that important to us, so that we can focus on where we're more profitable and we're growing, and then building out a group of people around me that can do the same thing that I do. And that allows us to scale and build into clients. So the whole thing was iterative. I remember starting and just picking up the phone and calling my first customer. And I called and called and called. It took me a while. I finally got somebody to buy something from me. It took 2 years to get my first enterprise level customer. I sold ADP, but that was only after I'd sold 13 of their recruiters into using my platform to recruit salespeople. And then I got Verizon. I picked up AT&T, picked up Sprint, picked up Edward Jones, who's who of companies. But it just took a while for that to happen. And the same thing with training and development. It was the same thing. Although training and development and consulting got a little bit easier as I got a broader platform. I got more well-known as an author, and I have the benefit that a lot of people don't have. And that is because I've written 9 books, and because I'm in airports and bookstores and all over the place on social media, that it's a lot easier for me to generate leads than people who are just starting out. But I don't want to discount the fact this has been 12 solid years of grind to get to that point where I can say that.
Early on. So for the consultant that's listening to this and saying, well, or any product that's generating a consistent couple of $1 million a year for me, and my real goal and aim is to win more of those logos of those top tier Fortune 500 types of companies that you just mentioned, if they don't have that consistent kind of external or side income, they don't have all the books yet either. What would you suggest? What is, in your experience, the best strategy or approach to get in front of corporate clients?
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
Well, I just explained it. I didn't have a book. I didn't have a job board. I didn't have any of that. I had to make some decisions. Where can I get revenue that makes it easier for me to sell me? And I picked something that I knew. I understood that jobs was something that people are willing to pay for, that companies are willing to pay for. So I just found that. That was me sitting in a car in front of my son's elementary school. I still had to build it. It took 2 years to build it out. So that's not the path that everybody takes. It was just my path. I just realized that if I had regular recurring revenue, it was going to be easier for me to do the things that I really wanted to do, because then I wouldn't be worrying about whether I needed revenue. It's a simple thing. If you're a consultant, it's the same thing. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go take a client that underpays you so that you can get revenue coming in. And then you got to build a little bit of more margin in your life. And then you got to go get another one and another one and another one. And it's one at a time. Now, what I do from a consulting standpoint now, and what I would suggest consultants do, is I don't take on a lot of project-based stuff. So we do take some on where we have a project. I've got a couple of big companies that will do a 3-month project for them around a sales playbook or an onboarding program. But most of our consulting clients are on a subscription basis. So they're on a monthly retainer. And I hate even saying a retainer because it's not a retainer. They're paying us a subscription. And then we work our services into that. And being able to look ahead and see, and I've got that revenue coming, I've got that money coming in, allows me then to relax and then provide their services. And if you're an individual consultant, all you're doing is selling your time. I've got a little bit of a different problem now, and that I'm selling other people's time, and I still have to be able to support that with my administrative team and my operations team. But if I'm a consultant and I'm starting out with nothing, like nothing, A, what am I good at? What am I great at? B, you're probably not going to reach into a Fortune 500 company and pick off a consulting contract immediately. So I'd probably be in the SMB space initially. And then you'll leverage that up because the people in the SMB space have a tendency to move into the larger company space. If you came out of that space, let's say that you did what I did, you're in your late 30s and you drop out of the corporate world and move into a consulting world, the very first thing you need to do is call everybody you know and ask them to give you work. That's what I did. I mean, I just called all my buddies up. It wasn't enough to sustain me, but it was enough to give me work. And it wasn't the kind of work that I wanted because I didn't really want to take handouts from my buddies, but I needed my buddies to give me those handouts. So that's what you do. That would be the very first thing that I did. Listen, let me tell you something. I crashed job fairs. I'm a former corporate executive. I would go to job fairs with flyers and get kicked out by security. I cold called. I knocked on doors. I picked up the phone. I got told no. I called my friends and asked for anything. But we go back to fear driving you. If fear drives you, I'm not afraid to go in and do that. But I can tell you this, if you're a consultant and you're sitting around waiting for people to call you, if you've got your head to the sky waiting for it to rain with your mouth open, I got news for you. It ain't going to happen. It just doesn't work that way. You may get a random project. You may leave your old company and they may hire you on as an independent contractor, come back to them, but you don't have any diversity in your portfolio at that point, and you're going to be at the whim of that company. So the only way to do this is to bust your rear end, get a few customers, prove yourself out, get a referral, get the next one, get a referral, get the next one. And honestly, the hardest thing you're going to have to do is scale yourself. Now, if you just want to run a lifestyle business, I talked to a consultant just yesterday. I know exactly what I need to make for me and my wife to be comfortable. If that's what you want to do, that's cool. Find out what you need to make to be comfortable. If you're like me and you're like, I want to grow and build and scale and build something bigger, then you're going to have to think about at what point in that space do you begin jumping off and bringing on the next person, which, by the way, will be the hardest thing that you ever do. But there's no magic pill here. You have to pick up the phone. You have to call people and get off email and don't just blanket people. Pick up the phone, call people, and start with people that you know. That's the fastest, easiest way to get something. And be humble and take what you can get if you're just starting out, and recognize that what you get today will not be what you're doing tomorrow, but you build a reputation, you get some work going, you're going to have to live at a lower lifestyle than you were planning on at first. And then you grow that and grow that and grow that and grow that and add on the client, add on the client, add on the client. There's no other way. It's just a grind. That's just how you do it. I know that people want a magic pill or they want an easy button. I wish there was one. There's just not one. That's just how you do this.
Great advice. Jeb, you mentioned that you have productized your services so that you deliver them on a subscription, ongoing, recurring basis. Share with us for a moment in a bit more detail, what does that actually look like? What are people getting when they are subscribing to your services on an ongoing basis?
When we look at our customer base and the way customers come to us, there's basically, if you were to draw a rectangle and put 4 quadrants on it, and the lower left-hand quadrant, it's called events. And events are basically our primary place. So 90% of our business comes in through an event. An event is someone calls us and they want us to do a workshop for their conference or sales meeting, or we have someone call us in and say, can you come do a keynote for us? Or we've got 30 people we need to do a training for. Typically events. Most of our stuff comes in through that space. If you move up to the upper left-hand quadrant, that's licensing. Licensing is when we have intellectual property, so training property, what have you, people want to license that. We'll typically, with larger companies, move from events into a licensing agreement. So on the lower right-hand quadrant, we have projects. So projects, primarily, we have building out sales playbooks for companies. They're starting up, they need help. Building out sales onboarding programs, sales compensation, helping a company figure out what their infrastructure should be. So what should inside sales look like? What should outside sales look like? Account management versus hunter, those type of things. We have a proprietary process for helping people understand that, walking through the process. And we do assessments of sales teams and even operations teams. And then in the upper right-hand quadrant are what we call integrated partnerships. The integrated partnerships are our subscription services. And essentially in those relationships, those organizations have said, we want you to be part of our company. And what we're able to do is we're able to slot in an event. We just want to do a training event. Or I've got, for example, I've got an expert in inside sales. We have an inside sales team and we need somebody here with us once a week that just is on our floor coaching people. We need executive coaching. We need to do some hiring assessments here. We want to license some of your product. We want to use your learning management system. We have a platform called Sales Gravy University. So we want to subscribe to that and be able to use that for our training. So the integrated partnership is take every single thing that we do and take a client and then say to the client, what do we need to do to help you grow your sales faster? Because that's essentially what we are. We're a sales acceleration company. And what do we need to do there? And we're able to plug different things in. But because we have a recurring revenue process or scheme in this situation and longer term contract, it's easy for us to deploy our assets. We have limited assets like anyone else into those organizations, but everybody wins. We can predict what our revenue is going to be, which is important if you have limited assets. And our clients are able to predict what their spend is going to be. So they're not paying on a project basis or they're getting nickeled and dimed over here or over there. So their overall cost goes down and our ability to be agile goes up. While at the same time, our risk of deploying an asset and missing out another revenue source goes down because we're able to deploy that asset in there. So consultants ask me about this all the time. Like, how do you do that? And there's two things that I tell people. One, I ask for it. So it's number one, I ask. And I don't like project-based stuff and I don't like hourly stuff because I'm doing hourly stuff. I always feel bad when I'm sending them an invoice and I get questioned on my hours. And I don't like project stuff because when the project's over, I spent my energy on a project and now it's over. So I'm in feast or famine all the time. So what I do is I just say, this is what I recommend. That's how I do it. Now, some people don't want to do it that way. Like I said, I've got really big companies in the Fortune 500 space who come to us on a project by project basis. But in those cases, the amount of revenue we get for those projects is large enough to offset the risk of deploying assets into those projects temporarily. So I was up in Boston recently and a consultant who's in my space was asking me, how do we get all these subscriptions? And when I say subscription, it's just a monthly revenue. It's a contract that says the contract value is this much, but you pay me over the period of time. And then I deploy the assets as we go. I asked for it and I just started asking for it because I realized I was happier in those situations. My client was happier in those situations and nobody resented anyone because we all knew exactly what we were getting and everybody was winning.
That is such an important lesson right there and can be applied to many different areas of business growth, right? Just ask for what you want, right? Put it out there because if you don't, you're not going to get it. But if you do, as you've just shown here and many others have experienced as well who have done this, you can often get what you want. So thank you for sharing that, Jeb. I want to ask you about your brand. You have Sales Gravy, which is your company, a well-established brand. You're working with your clients, but you also have the Jeb brand, right? Where you have videos and you put out content. How do you see those two in terms of supporting each other? And why not run, as some people do, everything through Jeb brand or everything through Sales Gravy? You have kind of these two distinct brands, which obviously are working together, but I'm interested in your thoughts on why you run them as kind of separate entities.
Well, let's go back to the 4 quadrants. So if we go back to the 4 quadrants, number one place where people come to us is through events. And the reason they come to us for the events is because I'm a well-known commodity in my particular niche. So I've written 9 books, several of which have been, international bestsellers. I'm published in pretty much every language on earth, other than probably North Korean as a language. These days, my new book is out in Chinese right now. I mean, it's moving in as we speak before the book even came out. So people know who I am. We drive our own conferences. I do tons of keynotes. And because of that, people call in. Sales Gravy didn't write the book. I wrote the book. Now, if you look at any of my book covers, salesgravy.com is on the book cover, not jebblount.com. And that was a decision that I made in 2009. And that was, what am I going to be? Am I going to be Jeb Blount, the brand? Is that going to be my brand? Or am I going to have a brand that can live without me? And I made that decision. Now, in Sales Gravy, it's an interesting name. People don't forget it. It's not a very corporate name. And we've struggled with that to some extent. I think in the early days, people didn't take us seriously because of the name of the company. These days, it's not so much a problem. So for me, it's about the two brands are intertwined and they're not separate from each other. But one is the way people interact with me, the human being, is Jeb Blount. My name's not Sales Gravy, it's Jeb. And people read my books and people consume my podcast and look at my videos and come to my conferences. But my company Sales Gravy has got to be able to survive without me. Otherwise, if something happens to me, God forbid, then my company folds up at the same time. Now, there are some brands out there like Zig Ziglar where his family's been able to keep that moving. And Dale Carnegie, clearly, it was in the 1920s when he was alive or earlier than that. And they've been able to keep that brand going. That was the decision that I made. And people have questioned my decision from time to time. So far, I haven't been wrong.
And when you say for the brand to be able to live beyond you, if that's kind of the way that you choose to, or for some reason that should happen, is it also connected to the potential and the opportunity to sell the business at some point?
Yes, you can't, like, who would buy Jeb Blount? And if you think about selling your business, if you're a consultant, you sell your business and you're everything to the business, then first of all, you got a couple of problems. One is if you sell the business, you have an earnout. And if you have an earnout, you're not going to get all the money for your business up front. And the likelihood that you get your earnout goes down exponentially. Mm-hmm. So really tough place to be. Plus, if you were the business, it's not really sellable because all you have is maybe a portfolio of clients in your name. So if you want to sell your company, you have to be able to sell something that is beyond you. And I'm not in a situation where right now my company could go on without me, but we're close. If something happened to me tragically, we would probably survive, but it would be difficult. But we're not far away. We're a couple of years away. And not that I have any aim to sell my company at all. I hope that when I'm 90, I'm still running this company. I'm not looking ahead. I'm not one of these people that says, oh my God, one of these days when I get out, one of these days when I sell my company. I love what I do. I wake up every day and I'm happy. So I don't have any desire to sell. However, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't build a business to sell the business. You should create a business that is sellable. And to make your business sellable as a consultant, you can't be the business. You just can't be the business. So you talked about a proven or a productization of your systems and processes. That would be one of the key things that you would need to do in order to sell your business is have a system and a product and a process. So for Sales Gravy, part of the product is our intellectual property, which I built because I wrote the books and then built the training programs and then built the curriculum and then built out the licensing for those particular products. So part of it is the process that we go through for building playbooks and doing basic sales acceleration consulting. So you as a consultant, as you begin looking forward, I think everybody must say, and this is my opinion, how can I sell my business? But if you are under the illusion or the delusion, either one, that you can sell your business because let's say you're knocking down 750,000 or 1.5 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, individual consultant with a book of clients, maybe you're a little higher than that, but it's pretty hard to bill higher than that all by yourself. If you're doing that, you have no business to sell. All you have is a lifestyle business. It's not until you add people and that you create systems and that you begin specializing in a particular niche and get really good at that particular niche that you have something that's sellable. So I think a lot of people don't really get or understand that, and nor did I for a long time. And so as a business, my goal is to the personality that people in my space know and love and buy. There's no reason for me to change that. But at the same time, I've got to build a business that supports the families that work for me. I've got 16 families that are involved in my business that we need to feed and take care of. And I've got to make sure that if my family wanted to sell the business, or if we came to a place where it made sense to bring on investors so we could grow even faster, that we would have the ability to do that because we have something that's sustainable without my involvement always in the business, if that makes sense.
Totally does. Jeb, before we wrap up here, I want to ask you, you're very active on LinkedIn and in the kind of social media sphere. It's not just numbers. You have obviously a lot of followers, but even more importantly, you get a lot of engagement. What is one tip that you can offer for people who want to get more engagement, want to create a higher level of authority, visibility, and exposure in their own markets?
The answer is not probably what people want to hear, but you have to work really hard at it. It is a consistent commitment to posting and being a thought leader and writing articles and doing little videos. And you've got this podcast. This is part of how you create engagement and connect with people. It's probably the hardest thing that I do. I get burned out on social media a lot where I'll run hard. I have a marketing person who does social media for us, but unlike a lot of people in my space, it's just, I do most of my work because people are engaging with me and talking with me. You've got to really think about it. And I've got a problem right now, and that is that LinkedIn got really good and really hot and a lot of people are there. And I've got a really big Twitter following that I built over the years, and I'm finding it hard to do both of those things. Likewise, because of Messenger, and then there's an Instagram inbox and a Twitter inbox and a LinkedIn inbox, and then people commenting on things on YouTube. I'm so behind and so overwhelmed with all the people that are communicating with me that I just can't get back to. I've got 2,000, I think, just connection requests that are waiting that I can't get to. So it's a double-edged sword. If you get really good at getting the engagement, you're going to pay for it because it's going to take a lot of your time. So I wake up every day. My first 2 hours of my day are nothing but social media. That's what I do. That's all I do. And then I try to catch it during the middle of the day. I'll admit that I'm in that burnout period right now where I'm just so tired.
I'm really glad that you shared this.
They're relentless.
Yeah. I think a lot of people aren't getting into social media for one reason or another, but really rather than you sharing a tactic or a specific kind of strategy, I actually appreciate that you're sharing the reality of what it takes to be successful more than any tactic, more than any strategy. It's the mindset and it's really the commitment to doing it consistently, but then also getting to hear what the other side looks like when you do get very good at it. Jeb, I really want to thank you for coming on here today. Appreciate it and having your perspectives, your insights, and getting a sense of your journey, obviously a very successful one. So thank you so much again. Before we close down here, what is the best way for people to learn more about your upcoming book, to learn more about your company, and to connect with you as well?
Absolutely. So Barnes & Noble or Amazon, easiest places to go find that. You can type my name in, Jeb. Last name is pronounced Blount, but it's spelled Blount. So for most of the country that don't live in the Southeast, it's a pretty tough thing. But it's Blount. Brand new book is Objections. And if you're in consulting, Objections, Sales EQ, People Buy You, Fanatical Prospecting, all books that would be relevant to what you do. But you can find those in most airports, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, wherever books are sold. You can catch up with me on Twitter. I'm at Sales Gravy on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Sales Gravy on YouTube. You can pick up my podcast on iTunes. It's Sales Gravy Podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, or anywhere podcasts are. And then, of course, connect with me on LinkedIn. And as you heard, I've got about 2,000 connection requests. So be patient. I'm trying to get to them because a lot of people write me a note. Yeah. And I don't feel good just clicking K without responding to the note. So you might actually get connected quicker if you don't put a note on there. So, which is a really sad thing because everybody says you need to put a note on. But you can catch up with me there. And then you can come to my website, salesgravy.com. And if you want to send me an email, I'm jeb@salesgravy.com, jeb@salesgravy.com.
Terrific. For everyone out there, we will have as many of those links as possible, if we can, all of them, in the show notes. So just head over to consultingsuccess.com, search for Jeb's name. That's Jeb Blount, Blount, and we'll have everything there in the show notes and transcript for you. Jeb, thanks again. Been a real pleasure.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.